Okay, welcome back. We're on chapter 10, and I don't know how many chapters. I'm going to have to kind of stop once I get about 25 minutes in or so. So I never know exactly what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do. I just kind of like let the text, help me out here. So by chapter 10, he's in a hotel room, and the first thing that he wants to do is call his sister Phoebe. And all through here, he really wants his sister, and that's the main person that he wants besides his brother Ali. And he talks about Phoebe here, where he describes her as a very innocent little girl, but a very smart one. And it's like that ideal girl that is in Esma with Love and Squalor, that short story, and some other examples where you see an intelligent, articulate little girl, and she, like, unlike other people, has a good sense of humor. So you can take Phoebe to the movies, and she laughs at all the right places, and unlike, his other friends that he went to the movies with, Ackley and forget the other guy's name, but he said, they laugh like hyenas at all the stupid parts, and you probably understand that, and so there's something he keeps coming that's like reoccurring is he really appreciates people who understand art, and good art, good music, good classics. And one of the things that was said by one of the girlfriends he had for a while who lived with him, and what they would do in the evening is always just watch either the types of old shows like Leave It to Beaver or old classics, but it's very a more innocent age for that time, before film had to keep, stepping up its game with the violence and the suspense and all this kind of stuff. But just like the subtle things that you find very funny. I always think of It's a Wonderful Life, and just subtle conversations that happen that are probably not going to crack you up, but when the angel comes and talks to him and he says, you don't happen to have, $8,000 or whatever, and he says, oh no, in heaven we don't use money, and he comes in pretty handy down here, bub. I mean, it's a very subtle, that's just an example, but that's the kind of humor probably Salinger would have found funny and real, because you're not having to like go over the limits and keep the ridiculousness going to keep people laughing. And when he goes into one of the bars that he goes into, Eddie's place, that's how he also describes the music. Everyone wants to listen to the popular tunes because they want to dance and they react to it. He knows that Eddie can play some really good stuff, but he probably won't hear it because he's got to entertain all these people. And so, Holden himself is, even though he is very childlike, he's also, I think, like Phoebe, as an old soul. And he has a very hard time communicating as he's going along. He keeps looking for people, anyone, to talk to. And you start to see, like, as soon as he goes into the lounge and he's giving these ladies what he calls the once over and looking at them, and they're just kind of laughing because this kid basically is hitting on them. And as he starts to dance with them, the blonde in particular, he would try to start a conversation, and it was what, and there's just this disconnect that he has with people, especially as he tries to fill this void that I think Ali was, that was filled by him in his childhood, that connection. He's having a very hard time connecting with people, and he acts like he doesn't like them, but he keeps insisting on being around them. any of them. And I think that's what draws him to even invite a prostitute to his room, because he's so lonely. Just anybody to be around him. He's almost at the point where he's going to be suicidal. And so that need for communication is very huge in trying to get him to feel back, to come back down from this, well, or lift you up, I guess, from this depression and make you feel like you can communicate, which is why in the short stories like Esma and Banana Fish, they have to connect with children, because children are the only ones who are really listening, that you can have a real conversation with. And you know that they haven't conformed or to anything. They don't socially know exactly what the etiquette is, and so they say whatever they think naturally. And that's what he wants, the connection he wants. But he's like looking for it in all the wrong places. He goes to the lounge where he meets these women who he calls witches. He doesn't even really want to be with them. He thinks they're dumb. And you also have to look at from the women's point of view. They come from Seattle, they're going to New York, and they think, oh, as soon as I get to New York, I'm going to see a star. And they are disappointed too in their night, which is probably how most people feel when they go out expecting something big to happen and it doesn't happen. And Holden is just finding this out as he's going around New York, that it's still, you know, life is still life. No matter where you try to run to, your problems are still with you. They don't go away. So he's trying to deal with that, but he's trying to fill that void with whoever will give him the time of day. And so he ends up doing a bunch of foolish things. Like by the end of the dancing with the girls, they leave, and they leave him the check, and they even leave him the bill for the drinks that they had before he sat down, which he invited himself to sit down with them. And you can also see kind of how disappointing their night had been too, because here they are looking for a star, and the one guy that hits on them is, you know, not even old enough to buy a drink. When he gets to Eddie's, he does end up getting to buy a drink. He says anybody could buy a drink there. They don't care. But it's still a disappointment. He's in a back table. He doesn't get to meet anybody, and then he runs into his brother's ex-girlfriend, who is with somebody else, but is completely, you know, in love with the idea that the guy she dated was in Hollywood. And there he goes again. It's like she's probably never even read that great short story he read. It's the Hollywood that people want. What you also see in chapter 11 is he gives you some insight about his relationship with Jane. And Jane, again, she's an older version of Phoebe, really. She's book smart, she's innocent. They have kind of a romantic relationship, but it doesn't really go any further than holding hands. And you know, he talks about holding hands as if it's one of the just best things that he could possibly want. I think that's because that's what's appropriate for him and her at that age. And it's a connection, and it's a friendship. And, you know, he says he knows her like a book. Well, remember, Stradlater can't even remember her first name. He's not interested in any of those intricate details about her that makes her special. And so you see that Holden is respectful, and there's a hint there that Jane had maybe been sexually abused by her stepdad. She has a very weird, estranged relationship with him and is very quiet. And I think Holden knows that this is why she's very reserved too. He says, you know, you can't even kid her too much. You have to be careful with her, which makes it all the more worse that she was in the back seat of a car with Stradlater. And so this is depressing him as well. And then he gets to the bar, like I said, that becomes another disappointment. So we talked about the music, and then that's pretty much that scene. And then he gets to chapter 12, which I think is one of the most important moments of the entire novel. And it goes back to that idea of where did the ducks go? And I said early on that you should probably be thinking about what is it that Holden is really afraid of. And so this conversation is kind of comical. It's like the stereotype New York City tax driver. And you see Holden Caulfield kind of as a child receiving this person. As an adult, you would just think this is a, cranky New Yorker. But as he's being talked to, it's kind of like when you're scared of certain people at a young age at church, who have a very powerful personality and seem kind of intimidating. This is the way he is. But you see that he is also concerned for Holden, and in his own way is trying to mentor him and give him some comfort. So it's very easy to miss this, so I want to make sure that I read it. Okay, so he gets into the cab, and then he brings up the lagoon, the lake, and he's like, what the hell are you talking about? And he says, where the ducks swim and go around in. Do you happen to know where they go in the wintertime by chance? Where who goes? The ducks. Do you know by any chance? I mean, does somebody come around in a truck or something and take them away, or do they fly away by themselves, go south or something? Old Horwitz turned her all the way around and looked at me. He was a very impatient type guy. He wasn't a bad guy, though. How the hell should I know? He said. How the hell should I know a stupid thing like that? Well, don't get sore about it, I said. He was sore about it or something. Who's sore? Nobody's sore. I stopped having the conversation with him. If he was going to get so damn touchy about it, but he started it up again. He turned all the way around again and said, the fish don't go no place. They stay right where they are, the fish, right in the goddamn lake. The fish, that's different. The fish is different. I'm talking about the ducks, I said. What's different about it? Nothing's different about it, Horwitz said. Everything he said, he sounded sore about something. It's tougher for the fish, the winter and all, than it is for the ducks, for Christ's sake. Use your head, for Christ's sake. I didn't say anything for about a minute. Then I said, all right, what do they do, the fish and all, when they get the whole lake? It's a solid block of ice, people skating on it and all. Old Horwitz turned around again. What the hell do you mean, what do they do? He yelled at me. They stay right where they are, for Christ's sake. They can't just ignore the ice. They can't just ignore it. Who's ignoring it? Nobody's ignoring it, Horwitz said. He got so damn excited and all. I was afraid he was going to drive the cab right into a lamppost or something. They live right in the goddamn ice. It's their nature, for Christ's sake. They get frozen right in one position for the whole winter. Yeah, what do they eat then? I mean, if they're frozen solid, they can't swim around looking for food and all. Their bodies, for Christ's sake. What's the matter with you? Their bodies taking the nutrient and all, right through the goddamn seaweed and the crap that's in the ice. They got their pores open the whole time. That's their nature, for Christ's sake. See what I mean? He turned way the hell around again to look at me. Oh, I said. I let it drop. I was afraid he was going to crack the damn taxi up or something. Besides, he was such a touchy guy, it wasn't any pleasure discussing anything with him. Would you care to stop off and have a drink with me somewhere? I said. He didn't answer me, though. I guess he was still thinking. I asked him again. He was a pretty good guy. Quite amusing and all. I ain't got no time for no liquor, bud, he said. How the hell old are you anyway? Why ain't you at home in bed? I'm not tired. When I got in front of Ernie's, he paid the fare. Old Horwitz brought up the fish again. He certainly had it on his mind. Listen, he said, if you were a fish, Mother Nature'd take care of you, wouldn't she? Right? You don't think the fish just die? when it gets to be winter, do you? No, but you goddamn right they don't, Horwitz said, and drove off like a bat out of hell. He was the touchiest guy I ever met. Everything you said made him sore. Now notice that when he says, "Why aren't you in bed?" Holden's reply is, "I'm not tired," which is very much a kid response. And so what if you think about this and why it's significant, why it's on his mind, it seems like it's an existential crisis. Existentialism is kind of where the world is meaningless. There's nothing after we die. And this question that he has, of course, of losing his brother at a young age, not really coming to terms with death, especially, it's very unnatural at a young age. You know, when an older person dies, we handle it differently. You know, it's natural. This doesn't seem natural. It doesn't seem natural for the ducks also to be just stuck somewhere in this ice, and who takes care of them? How do they live? And this is also the question of Holden and growing up. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to live? You know, what's going to happen to me as I grow older? And the taxi driver says, Mother Nature will take care of you. That's the answer. That whatever it is that we believe or we think what happens or whatever, that the bottom line is that you don't have to be afraid. That somehow there was a time when you didn't exist, and there's a time when you won't. And I think that's the best way of thinking about death. And anytime that I ever think about it, and you think, it's a very surreal thought, you know, it's like, golly, I mean, that's crazy to think of just not being here. But there was a long time when you weren't here and it was fine, you know, and the world just kept going and turning, and things were okay. And that's what Holden needs to hear right now, is that everything is going to be fine. You don't have to make up your mind today what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And as he's looking around, what he's finding as he keeps trying to put himself in situation, control the situation, is it's always backfiring on him. So when he gets back, of course, he gets into an elevator, and this guy who is a pimp suggests a prostitute. And he's not even really thinking. He's just sort of says, okay, you know, and he ends up getting into a really bad situation. I'm looking to see if I missed something along the way. No, I don't think so. Okay, so the girl gets there, and the first thing he notices about the girl is that she's also young. And she says, I'm old enough to know better. And he thought, wow, that's pretty witty. And, you know, the original agreement was $5 for what they call a throw. And then I think it's like $15 for the whole evening. Well, she doesn't stay there for very long. He wants to just talk to her. That's the bottom line. And when she's saying, you know, come on, you got to watch. What time is it? I ain't got all day. He says, why can't we just talk? And this is completely foreign to her. But, you know, it's kind of been foreign to other people, too. What do you mean you want to talk? About what? What is there? What is there to talk about? You want to do this? Do this. And then, so he makes up the story about having an operation and that he can't. And she even tries to make an advance at him, and he gets scared and says, don't touch me, don't, you know, he kind of goes back to the child self that he is, and, you know, basically tries to just say, okay, here, I'm going to pay you anyway. And then that's when she says, oh, it's $10. And he has it, but I think it's the principle of the whole thing. He probably, if it was $10 to begin with, he probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. And then, so of course, he refuses to give her the money. And then the next thing you know is this Maurice guy comes and bullies him and eventually punches him in the stomach. And before that, he kind of alludes to what a coward he is. I think I accidentally said before that, he let someone borrow his gloves. He let someone borrow his laptop. His gloves, I guess, were stolen. But he said, what would I do in that situation? Would I go and I confront the guy and say, hey, you did this? He'd say, no. He would deny it, and then I'd probably be like, oh, okay, it was my fault. And he just says he's yellow. And that was a term that people said about guys who were going through post-traumatic stress, that somehow this was just something wrong with them, that they were already anxious and fearful and I guess cowardly to begin with. And it's a very unfair assessment of anybody, but that's the way it was. And that, and this is also, I think, part of that this is kind of tougher for guys in some ways than girls, because in this part of growing up, there's an element of having to be tough and macho and having to kind of prove yourself all the time. Well, Holden is more of an artsy type of guy. It's just he's not that type of person, and he has to reconcile that doesn't mean that he's not a man, or that he can't potentially be a man. So at any rate, they come in, and he doesn't want to give them money, and he's crying, and he is kind of going back to that little boy. Like, he was shaking and he was scared, and the way that he responds is very much like a little kid who's been taken advantage of, and it's kind of the same kind of talk that he says to Stradlater right before that fight. You're more on face. He can't help that the part of him that is afraid is the part of him that is the little boy in him that is afraid. And this would have been a very scary thing for some, big pimp guy. I mean, first of all, you're in a hotel, you're not supposed to be there. Maurice reminds him that you're not supposed to be there. You're going to call the police. They're going to call your parents. And he puts him in a really bad situation. And then he punches him. So after he's gone, he does something that I think is even more childlike. He acts like he got shot, and he's like running to the bathroom, and he's seeing this whole scene like it was a movie. I'll just read this part. He says, but I'm crazy. I swear to God I am. About halfway to the bathroom, I sort of started pretending that I had a bullet in my guts. Old Maurice had plugged me. Now I was on the way to the bathroom to get a good shot of bourbon or something to steady my nerves and help me really go into action. I pictured myself coming out of the goddamn bathroom, dressed and all, with my automatic in my pocket, and staggering around a little bit. I'd walk downstairs instead of using the elevator. I'd hold on to the banister and all, with this blood trickling down the side of my mouth a little at a time. What I'd do, I'd walk down a few floors, holding my guts, blood leaking all over the place, and then I'd ring the elevator door. As soon as old Maurice opened the door, he'd see me with my automatic in my hand, and he'd start screaming at me in this high-pitched, yellow belly voice to leave him alone, but I'd plug him anyway. 6 shots right through his fat, hairy belly. I'd throw my automatic down the elevator shaft after I wiped it off with fingerprints and all. Then I'd crawl back to my room and call up Jane and have her come over and bandage my cuts. I pictured her holding a cigarette for me to smoke while I was bleeding and all. And so the movies have kind of had an effect on, and he does say that right after, the goddamn movies, they'll ruin you. I'm not kidding. And so this is, I think that in everyone's childhood imagination, it's something that's happened to you that you can really uh, dramatize into this kind of situation that you're in, but this time you play the hero, and that you can go back and you can fix the situation and you can feel good about yourself and strong. But just that right there shows you that this guy is really a kid. And the juxtaposition, what I think is very sad as it goes on to the next, before this happens, the kind of the juxtaposition before Maurice shows up, he's talking out loud to to Allie, and he's telling him, go get our bikes. Let's go ride our bikes together. And this is really sad because it's his way of coming, of wanting to go back to a place, which is kind of what he's looking for all along, and getting nothing but disappointment. He wants to go back to that moment where he felt safe and where things were good. But usually, you don't know that until it's gone. You only know it in the aftermath of everything else. And you look back and you go, gosh, if I could put pause on one moment, it would be that. And for him, he's wishing he could go back and just ride, his bike with his brother to the park. It's a very innocent scene, juxtaposed to what happens when, then the guy coming in and demanding money for something that he didn't even do. So it's very sad in between those two worlds. And you can see that he has a lot to be afraid of when you see that there are people like Maurice in this world. And then there are people like Allie in this world, but Allie's gone. And I also think it's interesting, in the midst of this, he has this kind of debate that he had with a friend about Jesus and his disciples. And I think this is probably more Salinger's point of view coming out. He says that he liked Jesus, but he didn't like the disciples. I mean, and he says, they annoy the hell out of me, if you want to know the truth. They were all right after Jesus was dead and all, but while he was alive, they were about as much use to him as a hole in the head. All they did was keep letting him down. And then he also talks about Judas, and the argument is that he's having with a friend that's a Quaker friend that he likes. But when he asks his friend, do you think Judas really went to hell? Which is what the Bible says. And, did he go to hell after he committed suicide? And I can tell you, in the Orthodox tradition, the hymns that come before the Passion during that time of Lent, when we go through liturgically the entire Passion of Christ, that they're not very nice to Judas. It's very clear in the ancient hymns that we sing that Judas is definitely in hell, and the reason for it is because he doesn't repent. And so, but Salinger does not like this idea of hell, and he says that, I bet you everything Jesus didn't send him to hell. So it's definitely debatable. And at any rate, so this kind of discussion happens while he's right before he has Maurice come in. And so I've kind of skipped around a little bit, but I will go on with this discussion with chapter 15 next time. All right.